So, welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. Blockchain technology first impacted the financial industry and rapidly left an impact with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. But it won't just apply to finance as it gets more widespread adoption. It will also make a lot of waves and disruption from that technology in the digital marketing and advertising space as well. On today's episode, we'll speak with Joseph Snyder and Chris Brown, the CEO and CTO, respectively, from Lannister Holdings, a publicly traded blockchain technology company. And we'll speak about the technology itself, how blockchain is affecting markets in many verticals, and how they are working on building their own technology brand today. So let's listen to how blockchain affects advertising and sharks on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Great. Joseph and Chris, thank you for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. Really glad to have you on the show to talk about a topic that a lot of people are interested in. Not everybody can explain well, but we're going to talk a lot about blockchain today. But tell us a little bit, both of you, about your careers and how you got to be where you are today with Lannister Holdings.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us on. It's great to be here. I'm Joseph Snyder, the CEO of Lannister Holdings and Lannister Development. We are a publicly traded blockchain development company based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And I am a serial entrepreneur. I started my real estate investment career in my early 20s and moved over into risk management for a while. Chris and I built a risk management agency out to 32 states and tens of thousands of clients, and exited that a few years ago and have been playing with technologies ever since. I'm more of a business entrepreneur and mergers and acquisitions guy, and Chris is our resident tech guru. So that's what brought me here. And Chris, what about you?
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm the CTO of Lannister Holdings and Lannister Development as well. I have a background in mathematics and software development, as well as a lot of entrepreneurship. As Joe said, we've built quite a few companies together over the past 10 years. I've also worked as a professional software developer. We've built a software development consulting company between Joe and I, and then built that out. And now we're transitioning that company into the public company and bringing in, focusing on the blockchain space and blockchain world at the moment.
Great. So blockchain is a topic that a lot of marketers love to be able to. It's one of those nice consulting words that makes you sound smarter, but if you ask somebody what the definition is, it can be confusing. And it is a confusing subject to a lot of people. Kind of from a 30,000-foot point of view, tell us, what is blockchain?
Blockchain is essentially a chain of transactions in data, right? So you're saying instead of just having a database where every entry is malleable, now you have data states, and when the state changes, you have a new link in the chain, so that the data state and the history of the data states is viewable, essentially. So instead of saying, well, I have this piece of data and now I've changed it. Let's say you own something, I buy it from you. Now I'm the owner and now you have more money. Instead of simply that transaction happening and the previous data falling off, now the previous data creates a block in the chain. So there's a block of data that now says that I'm the new owner and you have more money, but that block is related to the previous block so that we can go backwards in time and look at what was the data before. That's essentially what it is. It's a ledger. Okay, so as we go updating values, the previous values are based upon the current values based upon the previous values in the ledger, in the chain, in the data structure itself. Now that has a wide array of applications, as we've seen. The immediate thing people talk about is cryptocurrencies, and which is where the transactability of data or anything you want really becomes part of that blockchain. So the cryptocurrencies are now tracked. You can say every transaction that happened, and you can go backwards through time and know exactly who owned it and where they owned it and what happened using blockchain technology. In addition to that, there's another piece of this whole blockchain world. Now, that's just blockchain itself. You can do that just as a chain of like a Merkle tree, essentially, just a chain of information which is connected to the previous piece of information. But then what happens is that a lot of what's going on here is the focus on the consensus network, the decentralization of that information. So if you take 4 or 5 or 10 or a million actors and you say all of the actors are going to agree upon what the data state is at the top of the chain. So all of the actors have to come together. Somebody is computing the final state, and then all of the actors have to agree upon that final state. And that makes it decentralized. You no longer have a single server that has the data stream on it, but you have all these different nodes, depending on if it's private. You could have 2 or 3 nodes, depending on the type of system, or public. You could have Ethereum and Bitcoin that have millions upon millions of nodes. That are all in consensus, that are all deciding whether or not the transactions that are being broadcast across the network are true or not based on the previous pieces of the chain, which really is the dynamic shifting sort of power of what blockchain is doing in this world. It's more than just the blockchain. It's the distributed consensus algorithms. It's the cloud infrastructure that is allowing us to do these things. It's the decentralization of reward systems that makes it possible for multiple entities to be involved in any given system. There's a lot of power there. There's a lot of disruption coming from that sort of technology.
So let's talk about how blockchain affects marketing today. I mean, as CMOs, as the tech savvy CMOs come into play, what are the concerns and applications and capabilities? There's so many different implications within blockchain. 2018 is a big year for blockchain and marketing. But how, in your opinion, how does it affect marketing, and what are the concerns that CMOs see and how to utilize it?
Well, I don't, I don't pretend to be I mean, we're definitely in the marketing business and have been in the marketing business, digital marketing and digital strategy for the companies that we build and deploy. And there's a lot of use cases in the business environment itself. From the CMO position, I don't know that that's really where blockchain begins its disruption cycle in the business world. We really see blockchain as a disruption tool in the core middle market systems and operations procedures for companies and verticals. And that's more on the CTO and the COO side of a company, where you've got people looking at, for example, how many humans and how many touches and how many manual systems exist inside of a logistics chain for a third-party logistics organization to move goods from place to place, just in the state of California, let's just say. And so those types of systems where you have inter-party contracts, where you have inter-party touch points, and you have an inspection point of goods or services or supplies or transactionality inside of a business system, that's really where we see the core initial disruption points for blockchain technology. From a marketing perspective, there is a huge amount of big data and deployment around the marketing space. For example, Facebook is a massive marketing platform that lots and lots of people use, and they're essentially renting out data to whoever wants to serve ads, and they've had some troubles with that recently, but it's a really solid business model. Big data is very, very good at finding ways to monetize big data to consumers, right? And I think blockchain has a lot of disruption potential there, but where we see it impacting and being integrated at scale is really on the operations side, the transactionality side in finance and insurtech, the contract side of things, more than the marketing side.
What do you think the SEC will do regarding blockchain in cryptocurrency? And I ask, I get that you submit your paperwork to the SEC, but do you think Wall Street will ever adopt this form of technology fully?
Yeah, it's already happening. I'll let Chris go.
The simple answer is yes. The way that this changes markets, the way that this changes ability to securitize an asset and then trade that asset, is revolutionary in the market space. And I'm not necessarily coming at this from the perspective of, is Bitcoin going to be listed on the NYSE or something? It doesn't need to be. You can freely trade it, right? That's kind of the point of the decentralized network. There is that you no longer need the NYSE to transact those shares. You can simply go to the next person and buy Bitcoin. You can go to the exchanges. You can do all of that. So there's the cryptocurrency aspect of that, which is actively changing the way commerce works on an international scale. Maybe not at the largest, highest scales, but on very small scales, and starting to be accepted all over the world. Which is not a game we're really into. We're more of a business tool development software company.
Sure.
But the impacts that's going to have on the removal of the central state agencies on the currencies themselves is going to be wild. I don't even know what it is. I don't sit here and pretend like I know what's going to happen in the future, but it is going to be a very, very different system from what we have ever experienced or had or built. And the technologies around the markets and the way you trade shares, the way you trade assets, the way you trade pieces of companies or real estate or anything else, it can have incredible effects. Like Joe was saying, if we take away, or if we give the ability of the average person, say in these crowd sale type of things, to be purchasing slivers of very large real estate assets that have solid long-term income bases and revenue bases that most people just, outside of your REITs and such, most people aren't getting in on these deals. And the other side of that is that it opens up the financing ability of Joe Schmo, essentially. If there's a system in place where I can go to the market, go to the broader sort of decentralized market and say, here's a property that I want to purchase, here's the current status of it, here's blah, 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 all the things you want to know about a property before you go purchasing it. And I can simply go to a tokenized or securitized market and put that on there and raise the funds to do that in a decentralized manner, in a way that I don't have to have, the SEC is going to be their regulator either way. But the instant transactability of these things, the fact that I can now sell that share, that sliver, any way I want to whoever I want to, without the restrictions of the partnerships, of the large capital structures, of all of those pieces, the technology itself changes the way that transacts. Now, whether the regulation is ready for that is a question that's outside of my wheelhouse by a fairly significant degree. But just as with anything else, the regulation will catch up. Maybe it won't be the same for many years. Maybe there'll be a gap there. Maybe these things will remain quasi-illegal depending on where you are. But the first movers, the first actors, the first ones to implement are going to be the pioneers that truly benefit from these things, which is why there's many nations looking at how they can implement, how they can create citizenship based on blockchain sort of cloud technology to move away from. I don't want to get too far out here, but
well, and property, property ownership records and all these things, and you really asked two questions. One was, how is Wall Street going to deal with cryptocurrencies, and one was, how is Wall Street going to deal with blockchain? And those are two very different conversations. Just to point that out, every single large bank, every single government is utilizing, playing with, testing, and deploying blockchain. We're based in Arizona because Arizona is very tech friendly. It's very tech forward. It's risk taking on tech law. And there's a blockchain sandbox that was signed into law by Governor Ducey right around the time that we went public. And that law allows companies like ours to deploy fintech services on blockchain in the real world for up to 2 years for up to 10,000 clients in the state of Arizona without the full regulatory process that goes with it. Now, there's still existing frameworks. There's still existing regulations, right? In the state of Arizona, signatures are legal and valid on blockchain. And so those types of things allow companies like ours and our clients who have interesting use cases and are looking at these things under existing regulations, right? Because the master limited partnership structure for grouping crowdfunding, whatever you want to call it, grouping capital together to acquire a scaled real estate asset that has a known rate of return over a extended period of time. Those are known structures, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel of, okay, well, how is this guy allowed to accept these funds and deploy them? There's existing regulation in place. The question is there a better way to do the contracts? Is there a better way to transact the operation and the investment with more transparency, more clarity, less risk, and more security, and then more liquidity with the token use case? And the answer is yes. And so what we believe is that, and what all of these banks and everybody is working on, and we're having lots and lots and lots of interesting meetings around the space, but what we believe is that these technologies will be brought in to integrate with and adapt and change and improve existing regulatory structures, existing investment structures, right? This isn't saying, oh, well, let's throw all the regulation out and then everybody throws money at everything and let's see what works, right? That's how people get burned. That's how fraud happens. And that's why you've got the chairman of the SEC coming out today and saying all cryptocurrencies are securities, right? Bitcoin may not be, but all crypto tokens are. And, that's a pretty big statement from the SEC that came down today. Luckily for us, we're not a cryptocurrency company. But, that viewpoint that this is a better, more transparent, more secure, more liquid way to deploy these existing investment structures, these existing systems, these existing insurance contracts, these existing, mortgage-backed or rental-backed securities. All of those systems exist. All of those regulations exist. All that infrastructure is known. The question is are investors 5 years from now going to be willing to invest in one of these investments that's not on a smart contract, that doesn't have the transparency, right? You reduce the risk of fraud by saying, look, this is all on a smart contract. Here's the asset. Here's all of the information about it. It's all completely open to this, even if it's a private blockchain, it's all completely open information to this group of people. Do you want to invest or not? Whereas, there's, I would say, more fraud in the old systems of, okay, well, here's a prospectus and it's all on paper, and here's this piece of property in, Bangalore somewhere, and put in your $100,000 and we're all, going to get this ROI. And so, my challenge would be to say, what financial instrument, what insurance product, what integrated business or logistics system, which ones are going to be accepted without these tools in 3 to 5 years?
So, in your opinion, will we ever see true blockchain standards that are sort of universally accepted and adopted? I mean, it is still a little bit, there are some regulations, but it's still a little bit of the wild, wild west out there. And at some point, just like the internet, just like with advertising, there are standards that came out years ago when these technologies were newer and catching on like wildfire. Right. Do you see where standards are going to be
absolutely that's
generally identified standards?
Yeah, that's just a business life cycle, right? We just joined BITA, which is Blockchain and Transportation Alliance, and it's a trade industry association for blockchain development in the logistics and transportation space. And we're joining that because that's exactly what they're working to do, is establish a set of standards and parameters and everything else. I'm currently meeting with the U.S. Blockchain Association and the Nevada Blockchain Association next week as I get to Vegas from Phoenix next week. And so, all of these industry groups are really going to be spearheading that, as they do in anything, right? If you're going into insurance, it's the industry groups that are going in and lobbying for change or helping to write bills and doing things like that. And so, we're going to see standards come out. You're going to see, standardization of the different pieces and things like that. But that standardization is probably got to be industry specific, as most standardization is, because the use cases are so myriad. There is so many ways to use these technologies and systems and operations and procedures and transactions that, the standardization that is perfect for logistics could be totally haywire for real estate finance.
When you think about ad delivery, how somebody sees an ad, can you kind of give me a description of how blockchain can help in advertising?
every time you're displaying an ad, that's a separate computer displaying an ad, a piece of media. But
Sure.
so if your machines that are distributing the ads are saying, which ad do I want to distribute, which ad is currently being distributed, which one is worth the most money, all the things that go into which ad does a platform show at any given point. If we're decentralizing that system, if we're decentralizing the ad serving itself, then the ad servers, the ad pieces, the machines displaying the ads can all be communicating with one another as the ads are shown and saying, this is the ad I'm showing, this is the amount I'm getting for showing this ad. Update the state of the data of the system, because an ad platform is just a data system that's just churning out tons and tons of views and clicks and everything else, and update the state of the overall system without having a central actor or a central agency there to decide which ad goes where. And potentially you end up with cost reductions because you're not running that central server, but you've moved the actual processing into the individual browser or into the platform piece itself. You end up with faster response times, since the individual agents will then be deciding which ad to show based on the last known state of the database, instead of pinging a central database asking which ads to show and then showing those ads. So there's potential for the decentralization of the ad platform itself, the showing of the ads itself. There's potential for moving to again, like a cryptocurrency sort of setup, where the individual's private data is stored in a way that is only accessible once they've given permission for that data to be accessible. And then you're talking about, does the individual users trust your ad agency enough to get ads from you? And at that point, I don't know what individual users are going to do, but then you're talking about individual companies and brands having to get permission from a user in order to access that user's information, which is sort of a fighting point of the internet at the moment, especially with everything that's gone on with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. And people are very upset about the fact that Facebook essentially owns all of your data, because you went into Facebook and put all your data into it, and they said thank you. But you don't actually own that data. You don't have a repository of it. You don't have a central place or your own personal place where you can say, this is mine. I own this and I get to decide who has access to it. These are all potential pieces. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, and additionally to that, I want to make a point there, because I think the question that you're asking is more on the advertiser, marketing type of question there. And so one of the things that I think helps to understand the way that these things work is we all have cell phones, right? And you're using your cell phone for business every single day. All of your connections are. Everybody's using it for marketing. We're using it for news. We're using it for communications. But none of us actually, on a minute-to-minute basis, really understand how the technologies inside our phone do what they do in order to give us the results. And I think that's more the answer about how blockchain impacts things like marketing long-term. Is you're not going to wake up in the morning and all of a sudden be like, okay, I'm using blockchain today, and we're going to do ads from a consumer standpoint. But blockchain, decentralized ledgers, smart contracts, these things are integrating with and operating on the back end of the systems and processes and operations that we're going to be using, and we are using every single day. And you're going to see cost savings, cost reductions, profit happening because they're integrated and being used. But I don't know that you're so much going to wake up in the morning and push a button and say, I'm using blockchain to do my advertising today. I think that it's something where blockchain is going to be integrated into how it's done, but not necessarily how you see it on the UX, on the front end.
You think about even just in an advertising ecosystem, but it could apply to any type of system, marketing or not. The amount of service. I mean, blockchain's taking up more data and using it more efficiently, but it's causing a larger footprint. Correct? I mean, what is the horsepower of machines that you need in technology?
The footprint of blockchain is expanding rapidly. We're spinning up massive amounts of cloud infrastructure or blockchain products, absolutely. Project, I mean, absolutely. But when we're talking about the overall usage of energy and things like that, that's being reported on a lot in the news at the moment. Bitcoin used up some significant percentage of the world's energy usage for 2017, like crazy stuff like that. There's a thing called the proof of work algorithm, and the way that works is that whoever shows that they were the one to complete the signature for the last block in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, a ton of other blockchains, cryptocurrency blockchains, they're the one that win the reward from the block. And the reward from the block is the cryptocurrency itself. So the way you get Bitcoin is by being the miner who completes the block, or being a part of the pool of miners who complete the block, which is the more realistic way to mine cryptocurrencies. The effect that has on energy and usage of resources in the world is obscene, as we've seen, because as soon as you give a person a reward for running a computer, they're going to run that computer at 110% every single day until they die, right? Like I'm not any different. I do the same exact thing. So what's happened is that these technologies are moving away and rapidly moving away from the proof of work algorithms. So we're no longer saying, we need all this computing power to find the next block, and the next block has to be harder than the previous block, or else the crypto coins are just minted at such an astounding rate that they have no value. So when you're talking about an enterprise blockchain, you're removing the proof of work, because you're doing it inside a closed system, right? You're doing it for the benefits of the secured ledger technology, of the smart contract usability, things like that. You're not really looking at it from who created this, who finished this last block, who gets the cryptocurrency for it. So if you move into proof of stake or proof of elapsed time type of algorithms, you really move the burden of completing the blocks off of distributed users for creating cryptocurrencies, and then you remove the burden of needing to increase the cryptographic difficulty of every step in order to limit the amount of currency getting out over the time. So you really reduce the resource usage when you get away from those types of platforms, and you move away from the problem of just absolute resource abuse in running these platforms. And Bitcoin and things are doing some of the same thing, right? Like they're implementing the Lightning Network at the moment, which has taken transactability from 7 transactions a second to millions of transactions per second. These are technologies that are growing, that we're understanding, that we're learning, that we're really testing out and finding out how they work and the best way to run them. But on a resource usage perspective from an enterprise blockchain integration, it's not going to be highly resource intensive. I mean, you are running multiple nodes, but most of the time those nodes are going to be purposeful, right? If you're running 10 nodes, there's probably 10 different agents who are involved in this transaction and need this information, and signed up to be a part of this transactable network. So there's cost sharing, not revenue sharing, but cost sharing among the infrastructure required to run these pieces in an enterprise setting. Or if you're just running them yourself, then you don't necessarily have that sort of scale of nodes, right? I mean, depending on what you're doing. But for example, we've seen blockchain implementation and consensus algorithm implementation into real-time swarm robotics. That's something that cannot be resource heavy. These are things that are running on a battery and have to have real-time information about where the rest of them are. And being able to do that quickly and cheaply is a major hurdle to creating things that can really work as a system and as a team on a distributed platform. So the resource question is a question that comes up a lot just because of the amount of resources that the current cryptocurrencies have taken. But even Ethereum itself is moving to a proof of stake algorithm to get away from the just massive amount of computational usage required to mine Ethereum.
So, Joseph and Chris, thank you so much for being on A Shark's Perspective to really open up our ears a lot more to just an amazing technology and how it's progressing and growing. Tell us where we can find out more about Lannister Holdings.
Absolutely. So we're LannisterHoldings.com, also LannisterDevelopment.com. And folks can find us on Twitter at LannisterNBDR, and I'm on Twitter at LannisterCEO. So We're happy to answer any questions that we can, and our teams are there. If any of your listeners think they have a blockchain use case or want to integrate it into a business or just find out more about it, we're happy to take those phone calls.
Great. Thank you again. So there was my conversation with Joseph and Chris and a look at blockchain. And let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from that conversation. First, blockchain technology could disrupt digital advertising completely, basically acting as a regulator to the industry. Currently, there's a central middleman in the form of a trusted media site like Google and Facebook who facilitate the buying and selling process. Blockchain has the ability to allow advertisers to directly buy and sell to the users. And when you think about the data being collected today, wouldn't you rather have more control for you and your customer? Second, standardizations will come. There are so many ways that this technology is evolving, and each industry is affected differently. Third, how will this impact you? As Joseph said, you won't wake up one day and announce to the world that you're using blockchain, and it won't show up on some UX. However, it will be part of your cost savings and cost reductions by integrating into your back-end systems. So if you have a question, then feel free to find me on LinkedIn or send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show regarding another one of the many components that affects marketing today. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.